Hello. Hi, Ed.
Hello, Heather. Thank you for all the good work you've done. You've done a lot.
Oh my gosh, of course. I so appreciate the opportunity to do this. Are we all set? You think we're live?
I think we're live. Let's rock and roll.
Let's rock and roll. That's right. Well, welcome. I want to welcome everybody to the launch. And actually, we can probably give folks a second to kind of join in. Actually, let's do that before we give an official welcome. I have both of your books here. I'm all excited.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. To them. Yeah. Are you in Florida?
Pardon?
Are you in Florida right now?
Yeah, I'm in Florida right now for another couple weeks.
Perfect. All right. Well, we do have a lot to cover, so why don't we go ahead and get started, and people can catch up as they trickle in. But welcome everyone, and welcome to the official launch. Congratulations of The Island of the Four Ps: A Modern Fable About Preparing for Your Future by Ed Hajim. Ed, this is your second book and the latest in what is certainly a lifetime of significant accomplishments. We're going to start by, we're going to have a conversation with Ed. We'll talk about your book. There will be some time at the end to include some questions. But first I'd like to spend just a very short note about speaking to how I got to know Ed, and to introduce quickly a couple of folks that we have joining with us today. So my name is Heather Hauck. I am currently the director of the Office of Student Engagement, Affinity and Inclusion at the DeMoore-McKim School of Business at Northeastern University. And about 3 years ago, Ed, one of our mutual partners and colleagues, Debbie Magnesi, introduced us after having, she had worked with you at Harvard Business School. And in August of 2021, you very generously funded what we have called the Hajim Scholars Program. The Hajim Scholars Program, which we are now in our full second year, supports students who are first in their family to go to college with an immersive curriculum that incorporates career education, professional skill development, mentorship, and access to a committed network of corporate alumni and faculty partners and advocates. It also provides financial support to our student scholars so that they don't have to work as many hours outside of the classroom and engage more fully in co-curricular activity. In just its second year, we've made promising strides, I hope, and to helping first-generation college students realize their full potential. It's been a pleasure, a privilege, and I owe so much gratitude to you and all the work that you've done and helping empower me to hopefully empower the next generation of young minds.
My pleasure.
So next, I do want to spend just a minute reading through your bio. I know it's extensive, but I think it's really important to set the stage. And I'm going to read this off so I don't mess it up. Ed Hajim, the son of a Syrian immigrant, is a seasoned Wall Street executive with more than 50 years of investment experience. He's held senior management positions with the Capital Group, E.F. Hutton, and Lehman Brothers before becoming chairman and CEO of Firmin Selt. Ed has been the co-chairman of ING Barings, chairman and CEO of ING Altus Group, and ING Firmin Selt Asset Management, also the chairman and CEO of MLH Capital. In 2009, he became president of Diker Management and is now the non-executive chairman of High Vista Strategies. In 2008, after 20 years as a trustee of the University of Rochester, Ed began an 8-year tenure as chairman of the university's board. Upon assuming that office, he gave the school $30 million, the largest single donation in its history, to support scholarships and to endow the Edmund A. Hajim School of Engineering and Applied Sciences. Through his family foundation, he's made generous donations to organizations that promote education, healthcare, arts, culture, and conservation. In 2015, he received the prestigious Horatio Alger Award, given to Americans who exemplify the values of initiative, leadership, and commitment to excellence who have succeeded despite personal adversities. Ed earned his BS in chemical engineering from the University of Rochester and an MBA with distinction from Harvard Business School. He and his wife, Barbara, share 3 children and 8 grandchildren. And you're, at the end of the day, just a really, really good person.
Thank you very much.
It's my
a little overdone.
Not overdone at all. So, Ed, before we dive into the Island of the Four Ps, previous to this, just a few years ago, you published your memoir, which is, I think I've read it 3 times, On the Road Less Traveled, An Unlikely Journey from the Orphanage to the Boardroom. I was wondering if you might take, just to set the stage for folks, just a couple of minutes to summarize your life's journey, which I know is a big ask, just to let folks who have not yet had the opportunity to read your memoir dig a little bit deeper into your story.
Well, Heather, you did most of it, the end of it anyway. I'm trying to find a way to summarize it. I was an only child, and one of my friends said, Ed, I think the way to summarize it is that your grammar school graduation, your high school graduation, your college graduation, and your graduate school graduation, no one showed up. So that sort of summarizes it a bit. But to add a little bit more to the story, I was born to an unemployed father and a homemaker mother in 1936. And my father was a difficult character. And after 3 years of my birth, my mother decided she needed a divorce, and she got the divorce and custody and took me from Los Angeles, where we were living, to St. Louis. My father got visiting rights and $5 a week of alimony and child support. On a Sunday, he arrived in St. Louis, and instead of taking me to the park, he got back on Highway 66. And you put the book up, it shows my father and I driving back to Los Angeles from St. Louis. He told my mother not to look for us, and he told me that she had passed away. In fact, that was something I believed for over 57 years. Dad was a merchant marine, and he was on a ship most of the time. So for the first couple of years, I spent time with the neighbors and some time when he was in port. When the war started, we started a 15-year, you might call it the Ejira trip. 15 years of hotels, motels, then finally 5 foster homes, the YMCA on 34th Street in New York, a hotel room in Coney Island, and then finally 2 orphanages. My life really changed at the second orphanage when in my senior year at high school, the orphanage was located a couple blocks from a wonderful high school. I got a scholarship, an NRTC scholarship to the University of Rochester. And although I arrived there in a black leather jacket and had a very rough first year, it turned out well. And as you said, I got a degree in chemical engineering, and I was commissioned as an ensign in the United States Navy. So that really was my life. Then you gave the rest of it. I was very lucky. I spent 3 years in the service overseas in Western Pacific, a year as an applications research engineer. Then I attended that famous business school in Boston, and the rest is history. I truly have lived the American dream, and I am totally grateful. I was asked a question the other day whether I was lucky or blessed, and I said both.
Oh, certainly. And I know for folks, I do want to make another plug. If you have not had a chance to read the memoir, it's truly captures your journey, and it's really fantastic. And I would strongly encourage
you. If you like fiction, people have said it reads like fiction, but it's real life.
That's right. Unbelievable to most. Well, you clearly have so much to share, so much wisdom to share with the world. And in your new book, you write about your philosophical framework of the 4 Ps, your passions, principles, partners, and plans. And you present them to your readers in an interesting way. You write that this is not a how-to business book, but rather a think about it book in the form of a fable. I'm just curious as to why you decided to tell your story in this way, and who is your intended audience?
Well, the idea of the book basically is that we all have a conversation with our inner voice. It is really our only constant. And what I've tried to do with this book is to develop a vocabulary and a methodology of that communication. In fact, the whole book is a conversation between a young man and an older man, and later on a young woman, and various people in the various villages. I decided to do it as a fable because I felt that fiction is a little more universal. It's also easier reading. I look back at other fables that have been inspirational. And if you look through history, many fables have been more inspirational than many other books. Take Move My Cheese, you go way back, Gulliver's Travels and Don Quixote and things like that. And I started to write it as a fable, and it just started to flow. I felt that basically I didn't want this to be a right or wrong book. I wanted it to be a how to learn to communicate with your inner voice, or with your mentors, your friends, your kids. I gave a talk called How to Communicate with Yourself, your children, your grandchildren, and your friends. And that's basically what the book is all about. It gives you a methodology of communicating with your inner voice.
Well, I certainly appreciate, I feel like the multi-generational audience, I'm assuming that you intended to expand it very broadly, but
well, I felt that basically it's for everybody, because essentially that's the basic theme, is that everybody's talking to themselves constantly, making important decisions, and I want to give them a better methodology, maybe not. But the main audience is somewhere between 15 and 25. I want to communicate with those people that are making very, very important life decisions. You know, in many respects, that's the time of your life when you're choosing colleges, choosing geographic locations, choosing partners. Yeah. But it is also good for people in transition. It can take them back to basics and looking exactly why they should make the next change in their life. And as we get older, you know, as we live longer, we're going to make many more transitions than we ever did before. So again, I think the book would be helpful to people. But I also want it to be, it's fun, and you'll find some interest. And it's short. It's a 3-hour read, and I think you will flow through it very easily.
Yeah. Well, I loved it, and it offered myself an opportunity to go back and do some updated and much needed reflection. So your book, you start off, you have the character, and is it how do you pronounce his name?
Marketus.
So Marketus is going to this island and has these 4 villages, the villages of passions, principles, partners, and plans. And you start off, and you refer to he starts through the village of passions, and you refer to passions as something that motivates you, something, you know, where you spend a lot of energy. You also share that you believe exploring your passions is sort of the first place to start, which I found really interesting. Can you speak a little bit to why you would recommend starting the self-exploration process, you know, with passion? And would you share some of your passions with us?
Well, first of all, I think passions really drives most people. And actually, to find the right passion will make your life very, very different. And you find, of course, I can isolate that. You find, you know, Van Cliburn found piano. That's all he needed. So most of us have more than one passions, and our passions change, and I can spend some time on that. It's very important to check your passions on a regular basis, because they do change. But I felt that as I look at all the different decisions that you make, your passions is the driver. What really excites you, makes you take 2 steps at a time, makes you leap out of bed in the morning, really counts. I always say, if you find that your passion, when you find your right work, you'll never work. It'll all just be fun. And I get that from looking at my life, and I look at my passions. And I think they start for most people somewhere around your middle to late teens. And mine were baseball, basketball, you know, math, science, and girls. You know, when I was in high school, that was what drove me, basically. And they morphed. When you go to college, they morph. They change quite a bit. You know, math and science morphed into engineering, and eventually chemical engineering. And, you know, my athletics, after my freshman year, I proved I wasn't going to be a professional athlete. So I moved myself into extracurricular activities, and I did everything. There were a lot of reasons for making myself busy, because I had buried my background. So I had to keep myself busy. I didn't want to talk about my being in an orphanage, and I didn't tell anybody. I just buried it. That's one reason for the autobiography, because after 70 years, my family, including my daughter and my sons and my wife, said, "You got to write it down, Dad." So I did. But then I buried it, so I got very busy. And I go back to one experience I had after being the chairman of the finance board, and I was even social chair of my fraternity, president of engineering council, student government, you name it, I was in it. But I also, in my junior year, started a humor magazine. And I actually found my true passion. I didn't realize that was my true passion until later on in my life. I look back, I love putting people together to change things, to create a product, to start a program. And in that, I found a secondary, but even more important passion, which was to help people do better than they thought they could. Wow. That carried into my business career. So your passions do change, and you can ask now, what's my passion today? My passion today is writing down what I believe in life and communicating that to people to try to help them on, you know, the road of life, the journey. And hopefully, maybe because the journey is always under construction, maybe I can help them through the difficult periods with my lifetime.
Yeah. I love it.
So that's sort of the reasons, and I find that the more I talk to people, my second village principles, you could argue hard that that's first, but in my book, actually, we take that on. The young man describes why passions are somewhat more important than principles, but they're intertwined.
For sure. And I think, so when you head into the Village of Principles, you take Marketus goes through a variety, exploring a variety of living libraries, as you describe it. His guide actually very specifically says, test how you see the world, test your beliefs and assumptions, test what happens when you use unfamiliar lenses to view the world. Consider the values and principles that guide the way you interact with the world, and consider how you put those principles into action from day to day. I thought it was interesting that your recommendation was around testing beliefs. So not just getting a sense, because you talk about the library of religion and psychology and other things and different approaches in which people use to approach their lives. But why testing beliefs? And is there an example of a time when you've tested your own principles, or learning or have learned yourself to use an unfamiliar lens to view the world?
Well, again, I did travel the road less traveled. I was my early days, from age 5 to 10. I was brought up in the Catholic schools, and I became very much involved in being Catholic. I learned my principles from the nuns. The golden rule was put out by the golden ruler, and they threw in the 10 Commandments too, and it made it easy because they said if you do the right things, you end up in the right place. If you do the wrong things, you end up in the other place. So those are principles that put in place. Later on, I actually was in a Jewish orphanages, 2 of them. I got the other side. So I basically got the idea that, some of these principles were exactly the same, obviously, but I also gave me the lens of looking at things differently and questioning and also establishing principles, basically. Yeah. I think all through your life, you have to establish principles that you use at certain times. Sometimes you discard them over times, and you're always, in my mind, adding new principles. It's kind of corny, but I used to put principles on my board. I'll go back to my passion. One principle I added to my passion was a very simple principle. If you don't care who gets the credit, you can accomplish almost anything. In fact, later in my life, I added even to that principle. I said the principle, try to deflect credit. When Heather says, Ed, you've done a great job, say, no. John and Mary, they were the principal important people that did it. So you see, you carry the principle and you get it more and more sophisticated as you get older. Some principles you have to drop as you go through life, but you should continue to test them. And I don't believe they're tested every day, but once every couple of years, sit down and say, what are my true principles and am I following them? And those are things like, what rules am I going to follow? What lines won't I cross? And I believe in actually writing them down. I actually had them up on my board, and I got a new principle. I tested it out. Right now, I'm in violation of one of my major principles. I spent 50 years on Wall Street. One of my principles was to live happy is to live hidden, which said to me, never be in the press, never talk to Heather, never be on television, concentrate on running the company. You're the chairman, you're the CEO, you're the boss. That's a big enough job. You don't have to be on television, which is another whole job. Or you don't have to be on radio. You don't have to be in the papers. Of course, now in writing books, totally discard that. In fact, my publicist says one of your problems is you're a non-celebrity. Yeah. Nobody knows who you are, which, is a real problem. But I found that during that part of my life, that was very important to me, to be, non-known and outside of my company. Now, unfortunately, I have to be better known to hope my book will be distributed a little bit better. But those are the concepts, testing those things. And they test in different areas too. And, it's not something you have to struggle with that, I'm going to change it. Just it morphs, it moves slowly into another principle. But they are very important, and you'll get a sentence or two in your life that will change you because you'll start repeating it to yourself. Hope that helps.
Of course. And we appreciate you being public and sharing your wisdom with the world, because I know that certainly other people definitely benefit from it.
Heather, it's scary, but it seems like it's working out okay.
Yeah. Listen, I don't like publicity either, and I would only agree to do this for you. So there we go.
There we go. Good.
So heading in, so next we talk, you walk us through the village, or the exploration of the village of partners. And you really talk about the importance of choosing your partners wisely, being intentional about that. you talk about the advisors, friends, collaborators. Why is being so intentional about choosing your partner so important? And then I'm going to ask you introduce us to what it means to be a prime partner or your P1. And I'm going to ask you who your P1 is.
Let's start with the first part of it. I found very clearly in my life that I was only as good as the people I surrounded myself with. Mm. And if I picked the right partners, I succeeded. If I picked no partners or the wrong partners, I usually failed. And there are very specifics in the book that show that. And I think that's one of the most important things. In fact, in today's world, it's even more vital than ever because there are techniques and requirements that no one person can have. So you have to have partners to get the job done. Let me spend a little time before I get to P1, which is the most important partner. But yeah. I really found there are three types of partners that I really want. One is I want a partner that can do things I can't do. And that today in the world of technology, you'll find out you'll need this. If you're not that kind of a person, you'll need a technology person. Mm-hmm. Second of all, I want to find people that can do things better than I can do, which is, important. The third partner is unusual, but I think something if you think about it, you like to have it, is a partner who does things that you do very well, but you don't want to do. So think about it. If you had those three partners, either in one person, as I did, big, tall, 6'5" Dartmouth graduate who basically did everything I didn't want to do and did a lot of things better than I could do. But anyway, we were partners for 35 years. If you have those three kind of partners, you know what you end up with? You end up with doing things you do well that you want to do, which is nirvana in a job. Now, it's not easy to find. Let me shift a minute to partner one. The most important thing is to find someone to love. I mean, you can talk about a lot of things in life. Find someone who you can support, who you can share your life with, who will tell you the truth. Yep. And I found that person, or she found me. I always say I ran after till she caught me. But we've been married for 57 years, and there hasn't been a major decision that she hasn't been involved in that hasn't helped. And if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be here. Mm-hmm. She's quite a bit different than I am. I'm scientific, she's artistic, I'm athletic. She's not, and she's playing golf now, but she's not. We're very different, but she has a sense, we have the same values. There's a lot of things we love to do. We love to travel, love to dance, love music. But, we're very different, and she looks at things with a very different perspective. Actually, she has a master's degree in counseling. We always kid about the fact that I was her only client, but I paid reasonably well.
You had a lot to work with, right?
P1 is get someone to share your life with. And in addition to P1, there should be a friend or two. And I had one great friend that, spent my entire life until he passed away a while back, who would basically, I was as important to him as anybody in the world. And when I would call him, and I remember calling him when he had spent his last year of his life, he knew he was going to die, he would start off asking me how I am rather than telling me how he is. And he was a great person, and it was a wonderful thing. So, and I find also groups of partners. I'm involved in investment groups and young presidents associations. People that get to know you over 30 or 40 years, they can really help. So partners are very important. But back to, I just found that in all my jobs, I was only as good as the people I surrounded myself with. And it was very important to me. And, there's a question of, sometimes you shed partners. Occasionally you have to, there's a question coming, and I'm somewhat prepared for it.
Yeah. So the Village of Plans, which I love, it provides a framework that integrates, the other three Ps to make informed choices. And here you're really empowering, your reader to become the person that they hope to be. There's a lot that we could go through here, but I would say if you could take a step back and just what was the biggest takeaway that you would hope, for your reader?
Well, not my takeaway. One of my speeches to a group of college students, a young man said, "You're giving us too many ideas," and that's one of my problems. I have too many ideas, and my goal for most people is to, if you spend 3 hours reading, and get one or two ideas, that's probably enough. But I give too many ideas. As he said, give me one idea from this book or from your life that I can use right now. And I said to him, write down where you want to go and how you think you might get there. Because I think that'll be very necessary for you. When it comes to a turn in the road, it won't be the end of the road. You'll know which way you were going, and you can change your plan. But the plan in my mind is to write it down and look at it. And, as we think, it's very fuzzy. We talk, we forget what we said. When you write it down, you have something permanent. and you give reasons. And I tell people, take out a yellow pad and draw a line down the middle, put plus on one side, minus on the other side, and write down the pluses and the minuses. And in the book, it talks about, context. You have to know your context. You can't be, a person who's interested in horse-drawn carriages in the 21st century. On the fourth, and in the 19th century, it's probably a very good business. So you're really somewhat a little bit of a prisoner of your context. What period of history you're going to live with, and when you're working on your plan, think about that. And I do recommend very strongly in the book to try to catch a wave or cycle or a theme where you get to wind at your back. And if you read biographies, which I recommend to all young people, you'll find that almost all successful people spent a reasonable period of their life with their wind at their back. I mean, I use my own example. I took over as the chairman and CEO of a small investment bank in 1983. Over 20 years, we grew it 20 times plus. It was a great success story. But if you look at it carefully, that particular point in time, the stock market grew 10 times. So I had the wind at my back. And so I think that's, and I can go into non-financial things. A friend of mine was a surgeon that does, curvature of the spine, where he found basically latent demand, great need was in Ethiopia. And he went there and he's now changed people's lives for the last 20 or 30 years because there's an unlimited demand for what he does. So he combined his passions, his principles. He found partners over there and he built this plan to really change the problem of curvature of the spine in the African continent. So I think that you can go from one extreme to the other, but that's the sort of thought mentality in the planned area. And in my book, I talk about the drivers of themes, and I talk about integrating them. Then I finish up with Marketus and Thalia, the young lady in the book, writing down their plan. And it's not just the beginning. And somebody said you should probably write it in pencil with a good solid eraser on it, but maybe not.
Yeah. Well, I will say, as an educator and someone who's worked for 20 years with young people, coaching, counseling, trying to lead them to through their own journey, I do so appreciate your approach, and not only writing this in a way that can be applied to anyone. And I love the magic that you create across the island of the four Ps.
Heather, you've come across something very important. One of the more important parts of the book is it's sending the message that everybody is unique. There's no right plan that I can give you. I go, follow this, Google right plan. Not so. This book will give you your plan, and that's what I want. Thank you.
Well, and I also noticed that it wasn't until the very end that you give us a little snip of your own personal life experience, and sort of pull back the curtain to show, that this was coming from your lens. But I love also how you do integrate we work with business students here, a pretty practical model and opportunity for reflection, and to actually have and encourage folks to write those things down. So I want to transition. So you have really empowered our school and our program and the students that have benefited from this Hajim Scholars Program. We have 3 students who were knocking down my door when I asked if there was anyone that wanted to participate. We have Omar Mohudin, who is here. We have Randy Severino and Annie Liu, and they each had a question that they wanted to ask of you, if that's okay.
Please.
Yeah. So Omar, do you want to go ahead and start?
Yeah, that sounds good. Good afternoon, Mr. Hajim.
Omar, nice to see you.
You as well. I just want to thank you for making the Hajim Scholars Program possible. So my name is Omar Mohudin. I'm 19 years old, and I'm currently running for mayor of Woburn, Massachusetts, which is about 9 miles north of Boston. And so my question for you is, how did you approach identifying your partners? Like, how did you know who to trust?
It's a very important question. I identified the partners under the 3 categories. One, finding people that I that could do things I couldn't do, and that it had to be done. Then I found people that basically things that had to be done, but they did them better than I did them. And that third partner was to find people, who could do things that I could do really well, but I didn't want to do. I'll give you an example. When I was creating the humor magazine, I'm a pretty good salesman, but I don't like selling. So I found people to sell. Once I started, I just sold the original advertising and so forth, but very quickly I put somebody else in that position. Now, the second question is much more difficult. One of the problems with trust is it has an element of time in it. You can't trust somebody immediately. Now, you can ask certain questions over a lifetime, and you're 19, so it's not so easy. But you can develop questions which have proven to you to be the way to find out whether someone's trustworthy. And by the way, trust is also a personal thing. Some people can deal with a little bit of trust and get away with it. Somebody they don't trust a lot, but they can develop a wonderful relationship. Other people need very intense trust. And of course, in P1, you need total trust. But, in certain business relationships, you'll find out that although, good old Mary is not terribly trustworthy, but she's very talented. So you find out some way of using her in your capability and making sure that at certain points when you don't trust her, you check it out. And trust is a very big, broad word, but it's a very important word. Now, one of the wonderful thing, if you can surround yourself with lots of people, those 3 people I've talked to, all of whom you trust, then you're home free. I found this one man who I trust unequivocally. I trust him with my life. And he and his team carried out all of those partnership requirements in business. Now, when I became the chairman of the board of trustees at Rochester, totally different group of partners with totally different capabilities. So again, back to context. So when you become the mayor of the town, you'll find out it's a totally different experience. The kind of people you want, the kind of people you can trust are going to be very different. And that requires, again, writing. Write down what you need in a person, and then what will be the tests of trust. And over time, you can develop some questions. When I interview people for jobs, over my lifetime, I found out I could basically eventually catch up. Like I'd look through a resume, ask certain questions, and find out whether I could really trust that person. But you're onto something very big, and especially in public life. Public life's I think more difficult than business life. Good luck.
All right, well, I appreciate it. That was very insightful. Thank you.
Randy,
You want me to talk through your mic?
you just look at the camera.
I think Randy, you asked a question when I was visiting the school a while back. I remember you.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, Ed. And like Omar said, thank you for having us. My question is, how did you figure out what you were passionate about, and did those passions change over time?
You've got to test again. Let me give you a couple of passions. I mean, I had a passion for baseball and basketball, and it slowly wore out. I mean, I found my freshman year in college. I mean, I didn't play basketball. I was sitting on the bench the whole time. Baseball, I played very well, but I found I couldn't use. I was not going to be a professional athlete, and it took a lot of time. So that passion sort of changed. But your passions over time, and when I tested, that engineering I loved it. I mean, I loved it. But I found out that there was something more important to me than engineering, which was putting people together to create products or programs. And engineering is a little more of a lonelier experience. It also required an enormous amount of time every year. I had 25% of my time had to be used to be keeping up, which was hard. But I found that this passion of putting people together, I found business to me. I took business classes at night. I was more excited about those, and I worked harder on those. Especially engineering, I was much more fun at the beginning until when it got very complicated. I started also to losing capability. I mean, for a while I wanted to be a physicist, so I tried physics in my sophomore year, and I got a D+, and I got the heck out of there quickly and back into engineering. So that's sort of your passions, but you keep testing those passions, and you'll find one that really turns you on. You get all excited about. And I used to get excited in my business about starting new companies and new businesses. So I was the chairman and CEO, and I'd start with somebody and say, I'd like to do this, and he puts a team together, and off they would go. And that really excited me. And the same thing in my job as the chairman of the board of trustees, finding new things to do for the school, get me more excited than studying some technical experience. Now, I have great respect for engineers, but I went through a different process. Right now, I've changed completely my passion into Randy Omar. No, that's what I do. And I've given up some of my business capability. Well, I'll give you one really big one. I had a hedge fund. I was running it. I was making good money. I was successful. It had a good record. When I became the chairman of the board of trustees at Rochester, I had to change my focus and change my passion. And I made the decision to that. So that's the kind of thing. And that's why I ask people to write down their passions. In fact, when I make this speech, I think eventually I'm going to have everybody stop and just quickly, on top of their head, write their passions down. But then watch them change. Watch them. And don't be afraid, because over a lifetime they should. And in your lifetime, then I can change a lot. But that's sort of the mentality. And I gave you a few examples that are really real. They're real examples of changing in passions. And by the way, context will give you different things. In other words, if you 20 years ago, if you tried to cure Alzheimer's, you say, I don't want to do that. It's not going to happen. But sometime in your lifetime, you might think, boy, this thing's about ready to happen. I'm going to jump in there. And that may be something you really want to do, or something could open up, where you could find a part of the world. You say, I really want to be part of that. This part of this world is opening up. It's changing. And it's something I want to get involved in. So you can get changes. You can really and you can make some. Well, my daughter made a huge change. She was running a fund on Wall Street and decided she really wanted to be involved in communicating ideas. And she stopped everything. And she was working for a while, but she started studying, a different career. Now she's the business curator for TED Talks. And she spends all of her time on ideas. She's more excited about that than anything I've ever seen. So that's about passions.
Yeah, so interesting. I have a million questions, and don't have time to ask them. Annie, you want to go ahead?
Yeah. Hi, Mr. Hajim. Again, thank you for having us. But just to wrap up the questions for us students, we were actually wondering, what is your next project? Do you think you'll be writing another book, or?
I do. It's going to be the Hajim trilogy. I'm glad you asked the question. The last book will be the lessons learned on the road less traveled. I want to take a book and write a series of short 6 to 10 page chapters on various lessons. Let me just give you first of all, the most important lessons in the book is anything is possible. I mean, I even throw in the fact when I was entering high school, I was 4'10" and I weighed 80 pounds. So I was a diminutive character in addition to all the other disadvantages that I had. So that's why I want to start anything is possible. I want to write a chapter on that. Then I want to write a chapter on education as a solution to everything or almost everything. Then I want to write a chapter on never be a victim. And I want to go through my life and pick out all of the lessons that I learned and bring them down into really concise, maybe 4 to 6 page chapters. And so people can go through the book and say, if this is their problem, here's a lesson that will help them. And there are a lot of lessons, like, for example, even writing down your plan is a lesson. And I can give examples of that. So that's the third book, and I'll sort of finish it off. And then maybe I'll try to write some true fiction. I'm not sure writing is my thing, so I haven't figured out what's next after that. But if you read my first book, one of the most important expressions that I ask you to carry through your life is what's next. It really is important, because in our life, with the changes that are going on, and the other constant in life besides your inner voice is change. I mean, just think what's happened in your limited lifetime in the last 20 years. I mean, 20 years ago, we didn't have a smartphone. And now we spend all of our time on it. In fact, I'm taking, in the morning I get up and I do Wordle first thing. I'm now into the next to top league in Spanish. I've got my Spanish up to where it's almost there again. I was fluent when I was younger. I worked in Central America. There's another, testing. I wanted to be an international businessman. So I went to Belgium one summer. Next summer I went to Central America and found out I was just too early in international business. It was too difficult for me to enter it. I decided it wasn't for me. 20 years later, international business was the place to be. But 20 years before it wasn't. So testing. But anyway, that's the third book. And book writing, and what I'm doing right now is if I can keep my interest in it, and if I can get people like yourself saying it's helpful. I got a letter the other day from a young lady who wasn't supposed to go to college, now she's a freshman at Notre Dame, and she said, because she read my book, that's why she's a freshman at Notre Dame. That takes care of my motivation. That increases my passion. So if I can find out I'm still having an effect, then I'll keep going. Otherwise, I may have to find something else, or if I live long enough. My wife would like me to sit on the porch and drink iced tea, but she's already convinced that's not going to happen.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Well, Heather, thank you. Thank the students. Omar, Randy, it's terrific.
They're amazing.
There you go. Annie, thank you too. Appreciate it very much.
Yeah.
Good luck, Omar. You'll be lucky. If you get the job, it'll be good. If you don't get it, it'll also be good.
Thank you.
I know. I told him he has to promise we have a plan so we can finish his education and potentially do both. So We're very proud of him. It looks like there's a question that came in from Facebook from Julianne McNary, my colleague at Northeastern. I have an odd question. If each of you could describe the other, oh goodness, in one word, what would that be? You're both such visionaries. It would be so interesting to see what each of you would choose. Oh my goodness.
One word's hard, but I think if I had to, again, top of your head, and I think this is a very good question, I would have reach. I'd also probably have believe. Those are two words that I've used quite a bit. Reach and believe.
Yeah. Well, I would certainly.
Reach means that, it's testing, and believe in yourself. Believe you can do it. Tell your inner voice,
Yeah.
I believe.
Yeah.
Good
Well,
question.
and yes, no,
That's
for
one reason I
sure.
do this, because I get great questions.
No, absolutely. And you have been just a tremendous, partner. I do want to just reiterate just how much gratitude I have for you. And I know you have done so many incredible, you've had tremendous, what I call fancy, big deal accomplishments. But I do want to take just a second to just say thank you. And I hope you realize that your reach, by making the time to share your wisdom, share your own experiences with others, I find it to be completely unselfish, generous, and you are, in fact, definitely changing lives.
Heather, you always get more than you give. Trust me.
Yeah.
And I've gotten much more out of being with you. And actually, you helped me launch a course at Rochester in life design, which we just finished this year. And I'm just, because of your success, I figured I'd take it to another place, and I've taken it there and it's worked. No, you get much more than you give. Trust me.
Well, it is so nice to see someone who has been so wildly successful, both personally and professionally, really care about and prioritize community and philanthropy and sharing it with others. So thank you so much. And the book is out now. I think today is the official
Came out today.
launch. Yep, today.
And the Audible will be it's very short thereafter. And the young woman who did the book, she has 6 voices, which I think is going to really be fun. It's a lovely thing to listen to. I've listened to it 2 or 3 times, and it really sounds great.
Oh, amazing. And do you know where everybody can purchase it?
You can go on Amazon, Simon and Schuster, your local bookstore, but Amazon's the place. You just either can type in the name of the book or just type my name in, and both books come up.
Amazing.
My name has been so awful for so many years, but because it's a little bit unusual, if you type it in, you get the 2 books.
Well, we will certainly be providing it to all of our student scholars and be integrating it into our programming, et cetera. So thank you for making the time. It's so wonderful to see you, albeit virtual, but thank you for taking the time, and thank you for sharing this wonderful book with us.
Thank you, Heather, and have a great one. May the force be with you.
Yeah, that's right. Take care. Have a good day.
Take good care.